permaculture is a design system. It's not a technique or a set of techniques. When I'm teaching it, I tell people I'm not here to teach you how to do things. I'm here to teach you how to think about doing things. It's how to select the appropriate response for any given condition. Another way of looking at permaculture would be to say, think of waste as a verb, rather than, it's what we do, rather than something that is not useful simply because we don't know how to use it. So I prefer to go back to the notion that everything is a gift. Nature is always trying to heal things, build soils, build more complex systems. If you look around, all you have to do is squint and you can see 20 years ago when we bought this place, it was a desert. Mm-hmm. There was literally nothing growing here except a little bit of alfalfa and bindweed. And so all of the trees, shrubs, other things have moved in, and they are building soils on their own. And I'm simply here to kind of help steward that activity. And as a byproduct, I get to eat very well, thank you. I saw honeycomb pattern, and I woke up and I realized that's it, that's how I'm going to irrigate. So I started doing this using the same tripod, triangle, that I was using to set up my 6-foot planting sections. I just doubled it and flopped it over. So these are 12-foot sides, and I created these hexagonal areas out here and began digging that and turned it into a large honeycomb to extend my irrigation system. So I run the water through here once a year, and it has begun to irrigate all of this. And what I'm doing is setting up composting systems in place to take all of what was growing here, kind of the wilder vegetation, make compost, plant fruit trees, and turn this whole thing into kind of a forested area. We just finished cutting down a lot of the last of the elms that were on the backside. Had a huge project. That's what all of that wood out there got turned into. I chipped it all and saved a little bit for firewood, but mostly it's just going to become mulch to go back on surfaces or to be put into sponges. Garbage bags over the tree stumps from all the elm trees that I cut down and cleared out of this area. This will kill the stump.
Really?
And prevent it from spreading. Huh. And then I'll simply leave that in the ground to decay over time. It ends up serving like a sponge in place, and then I can plant fruit trees all through here on both sides and in here. This is a pear tree I planted earlier. The word mess originally meant a portion of food. And that's what I see here. Just think like a mess hall. Okay, so this is all food for the soil, and I will chop it back up. It's all going to go back into building rich soil right here. So I think loose systems work much better than tight systems. Tight systems are great until something moves. And remember, we're living in a Zone 5 matrix, and everything is always moving. So you're always going to be fighting with your surroundings if you're trying to control everything. That's what tight systems do. They're all about control. And I don't want to be fighting with everything. Loose systems, if you design it well, will simply give you everything you need. They will be telling you what's going on here and providing the tools to heal it. That's what I see these weeds as. Weeds and work and tidy are all four-letter words, and they're reflective of an unfortunate state of mind. You know, see them all as a gift. That's a nice four-letter word. So, but I much prefer to work with loose systems, systems that reseed themselves, that spread the wealth around, that share everything, that are constantly exchanging and building and creating balance. I hand water, even large stuff. I mean, here I can watch the water flow, but I like to walk along here with, you know, a shovel and make sure that the water is flowing like it's supposed to. Of course, it's going to fill up with stuff. Mulch in there is going to plug it up. I'll just scoop it out and say thank you. You know, that's a gift again. So that's a loose system. A tight system would tell it has to be watered X amount every day, every other day, whatever, dependent upon the temperature. That means all the electronics have to work. That means you're totally dependent upon the electrical grid. That means you're dependent upon totally unsustainable systems, and you are not out there any longer. So that's what I mean by a tight system.
Yeah.
So. This is very simple design. It's placed over rebar. I built this by myself. I didn't even have anybody help me lift stuff. About almost 20 years ago, and it's been totally functional ever since. I cover it with very simple painter's plastic. There's little point in the long run in investing in extremely expensive greenhouse plastic, because it only lasts maybe 2 years or 3 at the most, and this is the second year for this, and it's very cheap. It's made out of recycled materials, so, and it lets through plenty of light. In fact, this is the trickiest time of year because it can still get hot enough that I want to leave the shade cloth on, but I'll take that down probably in another 3 weeks or so. I can just slide it off, and then it's completely light in here, and I can grow all the greens that we could ever eat in one hoop house. In addition, I grow a bunch of other things out here and give them away. Take them up to Roadrunner Food Bank. But this is also where I can start things early and harden them off and transition them to the summer gardens. So I can get started on less hardy crops in February and March, and put them out into this hoop house and just cover them at night, keep them protected, but with 2 layers of insulation, this one and a row cover on the inside. That dead air space warms things 15 to 20 degrees. And the growing plants actually give off warmth. So they're heating their own environment. And we have more than enough light, even in the dead of winter around here. The only mitigating factor is day length. And we go through the period, it's called the Persephone period. It simply means there's less than 10 hours of daylight. And that's a relatively short period, 3 weeks on either side of the solstice. So from about the beginning of December until the second week in January, things don't actively grow. After that, it doesn't matter how cold it is in January, little microclimates, you will see tremendous bursts of growth. Everything wants to be growing. And in here, they'll start even faster. So, like this first circle inside here, I planted a cover crop of crimson clover. So that will continue growing and filling and actually building soil all winter long, even though I'm growing beets and chard and lettuces and chicories all around it. So the whole thing is going to be highly productive on a year-round basis. We're perennializing our attitude. Sometimes that simply means using annual plants, but letting them reseed themselves. And then every time I want to thin them, I have a salad. So we eat plenty of arugula in autumn and winter. This is all reseeded arugula. When I cut back some of the harvest and things have gone to seed, like parsley, I simply toss the leftovers out here and they replant themselves. All of this chicory comes from cultivated crops. So all of it can be used and eaten. I have radicchios, endive, escarole, and they'll become permanent crops. And you can eat the roots, you can eat the leaves in season. So part of perennializing things is learning how to eat again. Background radish. And a lot of that can be harvested, pulled out. By now the roots are quite long. And I pickle some of it, I slice it up and eat some of it, and anything that I don't get will eventually winter kill, and I leave it right there in the ground as a cover crop, because it's done a lot of work, breaking up this clay soil and penetrating deeply. And then all of the microbes, the decomposers down in the soil, will just finish it off for me, and I can plant right into the top of this next year. That way I don't have to turn anything. I don't have to be tilling. These over here are carrots that have reseeded. leeks that have perennialized in here. All I need to do is to dig up a clump and replant them, spread them out. And I have year-round leeks. These are from some plants that I started about 20 years ago. So that's truly perennial. And it doesn't involve much labor on my part. I'm not constantly replanting seeds. I don't have to purchase anything. I just keep planting it and eating it. These are some leeks that I did lift out of the ground and replanted on their own a few weeks ago, and they've grown up very rapidly, and they will continue to grow right through the winter. I'll be able to pull these and start eating them in about 3 months or so, 3 or 4 months. The carrot family plants are actually biennial, and so what I do is harvest about 75–80% of those and let the others go to seed. That helps to feed insects, keeps them all happy, and then they reseed and replant themselves. And then I can simply go through and thin them out. So again, carrots, parsley, celery. What I'm in the process of doing is converting a bed that used to be 4 feet wide by about 20 feet long into 5 continuous circle gardens. Why would you do that? Okay, there is a lot of rationale behind it. When I'm working in long straight rows, first of all, I'm kind of working, nothing in nature doesn't work in straight lines at all. So I always feel a little bit out of sync working that way. And if you plant straight lines of something and you want to use companion planting or blocks, you really are wasting an incredible amount of space, and you have to work up and down both sides of it to be able to reach what you're working with. So instead, I'm converting this all into circles. This one I'm just getting going right now. The idea is when you plant around the edge of the circle, if it's a 3-foot diameter, your circumference is a little over 9 feet. Going back to basic high school math, 3 times pi. So let's say 9 1/3 or 9 1/2 feet. That gives me the equivalent of 5 9 1/2 foot rows, 45 or 50 feet, planted very close together, intensely, and I can exercise my companion planting choices by planting into the middle and the center. It concentrates all of the work that I have to do, all of the inputs, into a very small area. So all of the fertility goes into the middle of it. See, here we go. That's 1 1/2 feet or 3 feet diameter. I mark it out. Periodically, there is a need around here, since I'm surrounded by large elm trees, to till the soil once every 2 or 3 years to dig out the elm roots, because they do tap in here. in the best of all possible universes, I would prefer not to have to till at all. But this reduces the tillage footprint to a bare minimum. I can concentrate, I can put compost in here, I can mulch deeply, I can put biochar in here, and in the center of each circle, at least during the summer, the warm seasons, I can put in Oya. So I simply fill the Oya as a way of watering. It works beautifully. I'm minimizing all of the inputs that I am required to do. I just come along and get to harvest. In the winter, I don't use an Oya because it will freeze. So right now, I'm making the transition throughout most of the cultivated beds, from summer plantings to winter plantings, fall and winter. Some of it I'll do by hand. A lot of it I have over here. I've already started seedlings of primarily the cole crops. For those who don't know what I mean by cole crops, think collard, broccoli, cauliflower, kohlrabi, kale. They all, I'm probably forgetting one or two, coleslaw, cabbage. They're all cabbage members, cabbage family members, the brassicas. And they all originally come from one plant. In the Fertile Crescent, many thousands of years ago, and the seed from that one plant was dispersed around throughout Asia and Europe. And in each case, then the cultures developed the parts of it that they preferred to eat. Rutabaga is actually the root of a kale. And so they preferred the root. In other cases, it's the leafy tops. But all of those can go in here. They have been so deeply domesticated that they actually prefer being transplanted one or two times. They're partners with humans now. They don't have much wildness left in them, but they can continue to reflect their adaptations to new conditions. So I will save seed from them and replant that seed. In fact, I have a volunteer over there of a cabbage that I'm kind of waiting to see what happens to it when things cool down. But they don't really like growing through our intense summer heat, so I wait until things begin to stabilize and cool down. Somebody once asked me my horticultural philosophy, and without thinking, I came up with what amounts to a haiku. Garden like a meadow, farm like a prairie, nurture like a forest. So the meadow portion of it, the gardening and or farming part, is functioning. Everything wants to grow into a forest. So I think of them as being interrupted forests. A garden is limited usually by things grazing it, or a meadow rather, or by fire, or by a combination of the two. In England, they would come along and mow, or they would pasture and run their sheep over it. Up in a mountain meadow, deer and elk would browse and graze it down. For shorthand, I just tell people, channel your inner buffalo. And so this becomes my buffalo bucket. And this is the stomach in there. So I put everything into it. Everything that I took off the top, I threw into this bucket. And then I will fill it with water and maybe put in a little bit of unsulfured molasses to get it going, or if I already have a fermentation at work, I just spoon some of that out and put it in here. It's the digestive system that is breaking this down and extracting the nutrients from it. Only recently I've gotten a book that tells me that they've been doing this in Korea for a long time. So I keep trying to reinvent stuff that everybody's been doing. But this works. So after it's sat for a couple of 3 days and it begins to smell ripe, you can tell when the breakdown has happened. Then you can pour some of that off, dilute it quite a bit, and use that as a direct fertilizer, like a compost tea, in effect. And when you've used up all of that, the rest of it can be poured out and then used as mulch directly on the surface. I usually cut things off and leave the roots in the ground, just like a browsing or grazing animal would do. That tugging action actually forces the plant to send out more roots, and that increases the fertility underground. So worms come in there, bacteria, and feed on all the loose root hairs that have died, and that's speeding up that whole digestion process, creating good humus-rich soil. In this case, I'm digging the roots out because I need to turn it once, but then I'll leave it for a few years. And the only replacement of fertility will be the bodies of whatever I've used, minus what we've eaten, and a little pinch of compost if I need any, like here, or mulch from all the surrounding area. So I'm actually enhancing the fertility without depleting anything from any place else. All these trees provide all the leaf mold I would ever need, and so all of this has been built up from what was building material when we moved in here. It was a deep hard pan that was converted into bricks to build our house. So aside from the tree roots, this is now beautiful soil. People fuss about notions of competition. Well, the trees take all the water. Well, actually, I haven't irrigated this at all. I've had no reason to. And look at how moist it is. But we haven't had any rain in weeks out here. So the trees are actually bringing moisture in here. It's simply a matter of whether your plants can get acclimated to sharing space with those tree roots. Most everything in nature cooperates and works together. If you are worried about competition, go along the edge of the bosque there, or the acequia, or any place else, and see how close together all of these huge trees are. And ask yourself, if competition were such a bad thing, then how are all these guys doing so well? generally what I like to do is only go down one spit deep, one shovel depth, and then once I've loosened that part and turned it, then I open it up a little bit more, but don't turn it. So I'm not inverting the soil profile too deeply. Inverting the soil profile means you are killing off all the work. You're destroying all the work that all of the organisms that live down there, all the guys who are trying to help us to build soil, everything gets wiped out. The networks of pore space and earthworms, tunnels, everything else down there is bringing in oxygen and opening it up. So it's creating little harbors for all the beneficial microbes that live in the ground. And every time we till, we're disrupting that and starting over. And so the way I teach it, the simple way of looking at it is most conventional agriculture and gardening practices teach you to start over every season. That means nothing is ever growing up. It's never becoming mature and wise. I want a wise garden. So and these are the seedlings that I'll be putting in to these various circle beds. Most of these are cole crops. I also have chicories, radicchio, endive, escarole, and this is one lettuce. I have another whole tray of lettuce inside. I've selected through the years for the lettuces that work best during the winter. So these will be winter hardy. And then I also have a lot of mustards, which get sweeter as the weather cools down. Arugula is actually a mustard. And so a lot of these things that might have too much of a bite during the hot summer months become wonderful and delectable as the weather cools down. And then root crops I usually plant directly. So I'll mix in beets and carrots. Soil building can go from intensive methods to extensive methods. Intensive requires a lot of external inputs in the form of imported materials or things you have to keep buying, or a lot of heavy lifting and labor. Hot composting requires quite a bit of heavy labor, but it works very well. The pros are it's quite quick, it kills off weed seeds, it breaks things down very efficiently. The cons are a lot of extra work, and there's a lot of carbon returning to the atmosphere. So it's a slow burn, basically. It's kind of incinerating it, but it's very efficient in terms of what you're doing if you know what you're doing. So it's too bad that we can't smell this, but I love this smell. It's kind of like umami. It's very earthy, wonderful smelling. And just to point this out, it's not quite finished. I want to fill it all the way up to the top of the tote, but even just getting it started yesterday, I built it right here. The thermometer says 70 degrees. If you want to focus on it, put it down and just watch it climb. That means it's cooking. Ideally, if there's enough bulk and the right carbon to nitrogen ratio, it'll get up to 150, 160 and hold there for quite a length of time, and then I'll have to turn it if I want to cook it all that way. So those are the pros and cons of it. But this will end up making very good finished compost, which I can then incorporate into garden beds, into kind of specialty plantings, and it makes a nice nutrient base. I'll probably take this over on the other side where I have my garlic beds. So I don't want to spend the whole rest of my life turning compost. So some of the other methods that I use are less intensive and more extensive. And the simplest one I've already demonstrated, showed you one, which is sheet mulching. That's simply composting in place. You don't turn things at all. It's a lot more forgiving in terms of the carbon to nitrogen ratio because you're not trying to build up heat. The biggest problem with sheet mulching around here is maintaining moisture in it because it's open and exposed. I have a number of different ways that I address that, but the most important thing is to plant into it as soon as you can and keep it always growing and always active. So again, perennializing as soon as possible with sheet mulching is one of the best ways to go. One of the simplest methods, which I've done over here, used over here, and will continue to do, is simply chop and drop. Chop it down, chop it up. And it helps to have a peacock hanging around, pooping on it, blessing it, scuffling through everything. Give you a better example out here by the other hedgerow, because I've been doing the chop and drop method out there for about 15 years, where I plant sunflowers, just the wild native sunflowers. I gathered some along the roadside, threw the seed out, let them come up the following year, and then after the season was over, during the winter I simply cut them down and chopped them up. And by then they had reseeded themselves, and it was beginning to make a nice bed. Plus all of the birds would come in, feed on it, poop on it. That helped to increase the fertility. And eventually then, when I had time and was ready to plant, I just put seedling shrubs and trees into that bed, and it took off. So I didn't have to do an awful lot of work, but I could treat a large area very simply. But it's a matter of being patient. Start small and simple. Start with what you have. Understand that everything is a gift, that nature is trying to heal and create balance always. So change your way of thinking, your attitude toward things. If you consider something a pest or a weed or obnoxious, that is a failure in your attitude. Ask yourself, what is it trying to do? Why is it here? And how can I help it to heal? Because ultimately, wholeness, health, healing, they're all the same concept, the same word. And so, understand your context, where you are, when you are, be grateful for that, and work to amplify it. Ask, what can I offer here, rather than what can I get from something. So it's all about our attitude. Where do we fit in all of this? We belong here, we have a right to be here, but ultimately our goal is to learn what is enough and to stop there. I can't think of any other way to sum it up any better than that. And this is the final product, the power wheel that we showed you some time ago. It's going to go up in the tree up here. Hang up there. Knitted together out of scrap materials. I'll probably tie in, see, we've got a smudge stick there. I'll tie in some OSHA, a few feathers from the peafowl and the guineas, and we'll hang it up in the tree. Pay homage to this place and the spirits of this place. There's the first winter jasmine blossom of late winter, early spring. And these are calipers. It's all a gift. It's all being given to us. So design carefully so that the system can absorb those gifts and make immediate use of them. Dinner, we're having a Swiss chard lasagna. I harvested a huge bite of chard. I barely made a visible dent in it. There's really no reason reason anybody should ever